Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, my dear brothers and sisters and viewers of Iqra TV. Welcome to another edition of Real Talk here coming to you from Bradford. I hope you've had a wonderful week last week, and as usual we bring to you in your homes people of real interest to us, or the Muslim community and others who make some difference in our lives, and those who have an effect on our day-to-day working lives and our personal lives, who have some contribution to make to us, whether they're Muslims, non-Muslims, people of faith, no faith, etc. So every week we try and bring issues that are of interest to people in the homes, in the community, etc. Today I have, as I always say, a special guest. No doubt this is a very, very special guest as well, and that is Reverend Andrew Haworth, who is the chaplain, the senior chaplain at the University of Bradford. Reverend Andrew, welcome to Iqra TV and Real Talk. How are you, sir?
Thank you very much. I'm very well indeed, thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here.
It's our pleasure for that you are here. We can talk about your role, senior chaplain at the university. I mean, Bradford University is a very large university, sat right in the middle of the community of Bradford, surrounded by a very large Muslim, mainly Pakistani population, as well as other people from other countries as well. Many different ethnicities, many different faiths, and people of no faith. So you are the senior chaplain in a very vibrant, thriving university, aren't you?
Absolutely. And whilst it's a predominantly Muslim community, what we have is a great collection and a sample of humanity from across the world.
Yes.
So whilst there are lots of things that are different about us and separate us as groups of people, there are lots of commonalities that we share and explore.
And that's what we want to talk about. The common things that we as human beings share, as opposed to those that divide us. In the very famous words of my late friend Joe Cox, we have more in common than that what divides us.
Indeed.
How long have you been the chaplain, the senior chaplain at the university?
This is the start of my third year, so if I'd been studying, I'd be up for graduation this year.
Right, so you're probably getting your degree now.
That's right.
So where were you before that?
I worked for the National Health Service for 27 years.
Wow, doing what?
I was the mental health chaplain for Leeds.
Oh, right, I see.
So I was responsible for the pastoral care of staff and patients and their carers for people with mental health problems and learning disabilities across the Leeds and York area.
So that's quite a change, isn't it? From very frontline sort of working in mental health to a holistic sort of approach, where I presume what you're doing at the moment, isn't it?
It is.
How have you found that transformation?
I thought initially moving from one institution to another would be fairly straightforward, but they are two very, very different worlds.
Yes.
So in the hospital you have literally a captive audience. Patients are there and they're very happy to talk because there's nothing else for them to do, really.
Yes.
In the university, I'm an optional extra. So something that they might have to do if they've nothing else worthwhile. But it was mental health that was actually my unique selling point when I came to my interview, because student mental health is a massive issue at the moment. And so that's been a really useful tool to have.
We've had a discussion with your boss, the Vice Chancellor, who's been on my programme, and we talked about this issue about student well-being and mental health issues. But we'll come to that. But, in your role, just describe what your day is like as a senior chaplain at the university. Please, for our audience and viewers.
I think one of the things that I love about the job is that there is no 2 days that are the same. So you arrive at work and you've no idea what's going to happen. There are set things that appear every week, so we have a number of regular events, but in between those you can have an encounter that lasts a couple of hours with somebody, you can have snap conversations with people, you can get involved in all kinds of different things. So every day is different in the life of a chaplain, which is one of the things I enjoy most about the job, really.
So obviously you interact with students and staff on a day-to-day basis. So if a student has some issues that they're grappling with, they can come and talk to you, whether they're a person of faith or no faith, and you would provide that counselling support, is it?
Yes, and if it's about an everyday life event that they just want somebody to listen to. If they're feeling homesick, some of our international students are a long way from home, so if they just want a friendly ear and maybe a cup of something and a chat, obviously that's something that I can do. If they want to discuss more around their faith and issues of faith, I have a wonderful team of volunteers representing all the different major faiths.
Yes, I noticed on the website.
That I can call upon as well.
Right.
But often what people want is just a friendly ear and somebody who will listen. And I've always said, you know, God gives us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason.
Exactly, yes, exactly. And I mean, how do you find students coping with the rigors of, you know, university life, academic life, etc.? You know, you mentioned that there's been quite a bit of attention on the well-being of students. We've seen some tragedies, unfortunately, as well.
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of pressure on students in achieving what they're setting out to do.
I think university life is very different to when I was a student at university. Right. We went away probably for 3 years or more. We lived in hall at university. We had lots of time because we were living on the campus. We would sit up at nights with a coffee and a slice of toast talking about the world.
Not cider, as the radio was telling me the other day. Cider and, you know, other incomparables.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But none of that happened. And of course, our fees were paid for back then. So all we had to do was have money to live by. These days, students are paying a huge amount of money. So the pressure is on them from day one to succeed, to get the product, which is the degree that they're going to university to buy. So they have to succeed from day one. Often parents have sacrificed a huge amount of their life and their savings to be able to send their children to university. So there's pressure from home, there's pressure from a sense of self-respect to succeed in everything that they do. And in Bradford in particular, a lot of our students are local students, so they don't stay in halls of residence. So to be able to afford the fees, many of them have got jobs as well as studying. So they'll come in for their lectures, then they'll go off and do their job, then they'll come back in for a tutorial and go off and do their job. So you don't see students sitting around drinking and chatting and doing the kind of things that I used to do when I was at university.
Right.
They come in and then they go. So lots of the extracurricular activities are very different now. It's a much more dispersed community than it ever used to be.
Well,
and I think that brings challenges to us.
Well, I'm sure it does. And I mean, like you say, you have people from many faiths and no faiths, many ethnicities from across the world at the university.
Absolutely.
Here. But 75%, I was told, of your university population, student population, is from a minority ethnic community. It's a BAME right. community. Now, obviously, that in itself is a rich resource as well as sometimes presents challenges.
Yeah.
What are the challenges that you faced in making the institution, the university institution, more friendly and more open and accessible to the needs of the different sort of people who come from various different parts of the world?
I think it's fascinating because institutionally we are still part of the old UK university structure. So there are various things that happen, the term times, the exam times, even the festivals that we celebrate are almost institutionalised. So without me as chaplain organising anything, on the first week of December, Christmas trees will appear all over the campus, music will be piped out through, and we will do Christmas at the university because we've always done Christmas. Whether or not there are people at the university who celebrate Christmas or not,
doesn't matter.
This last week we've been celebrating Diwali, and as a chaplaincy team we had to make that happen, and we had a little Diwali celebration in the Faith Centre and invited the Vice-Chancellor and the Professor of Diversity and Equality and a number of others, and I challenged them and said, if we're serious about being a diverse community and celebrating diversity, we need to get these high days and holy days and commemorative days into the corporate calendar so that you go into the atrium, you go into the Student Central building, and there'll be banners up saying Happy Diwali or Happy Hanukkah.
So it's an automatic institutionalized celebration rather than you or somebody else having to organize it specifically. Right? So, I mean, how engaging do you find the students are, when and how satisfactory does it feel to the students when you do celebrations like that. So those who come from the Hindu faith, for example, it must give them a great deal of confidence that the university as an institution is recognizing their faith and the celebration.
We want to do it to make them feel at home. They're often a long way from home. Our international students, many miles from home. So Indian students, for example, who have come along, we want to make them feel that for the next 3 years, this is home, and we will do things to support them and make them feel at home. And I think that's really important. And that's about student well-being as much as anything else, really.
Oh yes, definitely. And I mean, this is something that many institutions are now coming to terms with. And Bradford being Bradford, the cultural city of the curry culture of the world,
Absolutely.
Curry centre of the world as well, having won many awards in the past. And when I was talking to Shirley, we were talking about that rich diversity that makes Bradford what it is. But I mean, beyond Bradford, have you got sort of extra sort of tentacles beyond Bradford where what you do in Bradford is showcased to others so they can learn from your experience?
I think probably there are some nationally. I know that Shirley would no doubt tell you about some of the international stuff that we've got, and that there are satellite campuses around the world now that have automatic links with Bradford University. So particularly along our science and engineering routes.
Now I'm talking about the faith side of it.
Right.
And the faith side of it, where you provide faith counselling, faith support, etc.
I've had a number of chaplains from other parts of the country contacting me and saying, what do you do and how do you do it, and can you share some of that with us?
That's excellent.
It is excellent, but it makes me feel horribly inadequate because I'm sure there's so much more that we could be doing. And I would never hold myself up at the moment and say we're an exemplar university. There's a lot more that we can do, and we've constantly got to keep trying to do our best for our students.
So in terms of talking about other faiths and support services for other faiths, as you said, you have you were the Anglican sort of representative in the faith structure there, and then you have Catholic priests as well, reverend from the Catholic faith. Then you have somebody from the Hindu faith. Then you have somebody from the Baha'i faith. I was looking at that. Jewish faith as well. And you have some people from the Muslim faith. So all the others, are they volunteers?
They are all volunteers.
Right. So
yes.
they provide the support services as a voluntary support service.
And they tend to respond to me making a recommendation. They are all busy people, and so that means that they're not always around all the time to do the chaplaincy thing about loitering with intent. So I will make a referral in a way and say, can you come and talk to this student, or can you make a link with that student society because they're wanting to do X, Y, and Z. We have a Quaker student chaplain as well, who's a wonderful lady, and we also have a humanist non-faith advisor as a humanist. Just again to put a different dimension into the whole spirituality issue.
That's fantastic. Well, I mean, obviously, I'm sure our viewers will be finding this really fascinating, particularly parents whose students, whose children are at the university. They may not be aware of the services that you provide. So if you're a parent, and you want to know more about this, or you want to comment on what Reverend Andrew Howarth has been talking to us about, and if you want to call in and ask any questions, please feel free to do so. The phone number is 01274 214 299. It will appear on your screen, and I'm sure Andrew will be able to answer sort of questions that may be put forward. I mean, in terms of the faith advisors, the volunteer advisors, I mean, as you say, they are volunteers, so they may be busy. How much call do you get from the Muslim students who come to the university for, is there a demand for it? Is there a big demand, small demand? I mean, is it well known? Is there a sort of Muslim student society or
there
anything
are
like that?
3 or else 4 student Muslim societies who are very, very good at what they do. They organise Ummah prayers on a Friday on a regular basis. They take over the gym. They have an imam who comes on a rota to help lead with those prayers. The Islamic Society, Islamic Theology Society, and 2 other Muslim societies who are very, very active, and out of all the faiths, I think they are the ones who get on and organise things so much
Right.
more than the other societies. They do some wonderful charity fundraising things through the year.
Excellent.
There's
Right.
always something going on. They're very, very, very active and actually give me the least amount of concern or trouble because
Right.
they organise themselves so very, very well.
Right.
So supporting them and encouraging them is a very easy thing to do.
And these are all student-led?
Yes, everything that the student societies do are all
Right.
student-led.
Right.
So we have a Hindu society, a Buddhist society, numerous Christian societies. They are more of a challenge to me than the,
Are they?
the
How?
Muslim.
Why? How and why?
Because they all do their own thing and
Right.
they're all quite small groups of people
Right.
and they don't share with each other particularly well.
Right.
So my challenge is to try and bring the Christians together and say, look, let's do something about Easter together.
Right.
And they think, oh, we've not thought about doing that as a...
That surprises
as a
me. I thought it'd be different,
It's hard
the other way
work.
around at times.
Yeah, hard
Right.
work.
And I mean, these student societies, obviously they play a very important role, as they
Indeed.
say. I mean, they also provide some sort of informal counselling
I
support.
think of them as an anchor, really.
Yeah.
When people are coming to the university, they're on their own. They've left the security of their home. Sometimes they're establishing themselves as young adults. They're trying out different ideas and ways of doing and believing things. These are kind of anchor points for them to link into,
Right.
that give them a place of safety in a sense.
Right. And obviously that's a very important and vital role. I mean, in terms of the student life, it's a very hectic life.
Uh-huh.
Like you say, it's getting more and more difficult as time goes on. The economic times are as such that a lot of students are having to not only work but work some very long hours at times.
Uh-huh.
And we have a real, we have a very robust nighttime economy in Bradford, based on the food industry.
Uh-huh.
So they must be working all sorts of hours.
Indeed.
And at the same time, committing to their academic
Yeah.
challenges as well.
Yeah.
So the pressures on these students is enormous,
Mhm.
as you said earlier. And therefore the mental issues that they face are also challenging as well.
They are.
I mean, do you find that there are particular issues with particular sections of the community where, because of the external pressure, economic pressure, academic pressure, there are more challenges that they face as opposed to some of the other people?
I think our international students
Mhm.
experience that in a far more intense way than perhaps some of our home students. Our home students still have contact with parents,
Right.
grandparents,
Because
other
they're local.
relatives. Yeah.
Right.
International students can be a long, long way from home, and
Mm.
when things go wrong, it's expensive to contact the family. It's not that you could just pop home for the weekend and have a bit of home comfort to sort you out. So we have a great international student support team,
Right.
but often they're the ones who I end up also having to try and support and listen to. And sadly, when they become poorly, some of those issues can be a bit more acute because there is nobody around, so for a relative to come is a major deal. It's about an aeroplane ticket and coming over to this country. So it's important that we get that support right for them.
And how can the community help you with that? I mean, Bradford has this very rich diversity of people from many different ethnicities as well as countries. Now, I know, for example, there's a very large African population emerging in Bradford as well, both refugees, asylum seekers, etc. And some of these communities have got some, they're institutionalized in the sense that they've got community-based organizations. Are they linked into what you're doing, or would you like to develop those links? And,
I think this is what fascinates me about Bradford as a city. It's the most wonderfully exciting, diverse community of city of communities. But it's a little bit like a patchwork quilt. So each community is very inclusive, but doesn't mix particularly well with the community next to it.
Right.
And I think one of the challenges for the university and for the city, and hopefully bids like the City of Culture bid will help to do some of this, is to break down those. They're not particularly strong protected barriers between the different communities. They're just, we're looking in the wrong direction sometimes. We're looking inward instead of outward. So we need to try and stir those things up a bit more and say to people, there's so much that we could share in Bradford and so much richer that we could be if we only knew about what each other was doing and celebrated what each other did.
I think there's a very excellent point. I mean, a couple of weeks ago I had here Bradford for Better, which is an organisation. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them or not.
They do some wonderful stuff about just cleaning the city
exactly,
up, aren't they?
Yes.
Fantastic
we
work.
had a program on that,
Right.
where my guest talked about how they started off and what they did. And they're not. It's not just about cleaning up our streets and neighbourhoods. They're now going beyond that.
It's about civic pride, in
exactly,
a sense,
yes,
isn't it?
yeah. And I think organisations like that, who don't, who have a membership which is very diverse from all walks of life, all hues, all colours, all ethnicities, all faiths, and people of no faith, I'm sure would be, can play a very important role in what you've described. But in terms of the university itself as an institution, and I know all universities are going through some very difficult financial times at this moment in time, and the Vice Chancellor mentioned it. I mean, does the university have a dedicated budget to help you do what you're doing? Or is it something that you have to fight for every time you want to do something?
I have to fight for it every time I want to do something.
Oh, my goodness.
We have to put a case forward.
Yes.
And in fact, some of the stuff that has been provided to enable the chaplaincy to do its work is from very kind donors who've said, and some of our faith advisors who've had contact with things who've personally said, you need a microwave, I'll give you a microwave. Those sorts of gifts, which have been just overwhelmingly encouraging to us as well, because it means that people in the outside community do care about what we're doing at the university and are saying, let me help you to make this possible.
Right.
I think that
what sort of projects do you have where you need external funding support or support in kind? So like you're talking about the Diwali celebration, if you had Eid celebrations, for example, or Hanukkah celebrations or something like that. What sort of physical support or economic support would you?
It's about those basic resources, really, information that we can give out to people. So copies of scriptures that we can share with people. So I'm saying to individual faith groups, if you've got a copy of the scriptures that we could have, that we could give to a student in a time of crisis or a time of need, is if there's materials around about the Hindu faith or the Sikh faith when we're celebrating Diwali, it's so much better to have those things that we can give than trying to Google them and print something out and have it ready.
Well, what I can say to you is Iqra TV and Al Khair Foundation have a lot of published material available to them that you're more than happy.
That'd be wonderful.
If there's anything you would want, just let us know.
Thank you.
And we will provide that. I mean, you've seen the library we have in our studios here, where there's a whole host of information about Islam and what being a Muslim is. If you need any of that, please feel free. Just let us know, and we will try and see what we can do for you.
Thank you.
Because at the end of the day,
much.
it might help a student, in their well-being, and also get a better understanding what Islam is all about.
Exactly.
And that will make them better citizens, we hope, as well.
Definitely.
So in terms of touching on this issue about citizenship, do you find that students who are of faith, who are practicing their faith, have a better outlook on life as compared to those who have no faith? Or is there's no comparison between the two? There's no difference between the two?
I think there's a very fundamental difference about the way in which they live their lives, the values, the priorities. And I think that's true not just of Islam, but of all faiths.
Yes.
When I was a mental health chaplain, I was having a conversation at a College of Chaplains meeting where a Muslim faith advisor said to me, of course a good Muslim won't have a mental health problem. And I thought, what does that mean? I really want to unpack that and begin to understand. And eventually, so I took that on as the thesis for my MA actually.
Oh, right.
And what I discovered was that somebody of faith and of belief has a framework around which they can build their lives, which gives meaning and purpose. And when you have that meaning and purpose in your life, so much more resilience comes, and you're able to take on what the world throws at you than those who have no kind of structure or framework.
That's fascinating, because I heard a conversation on radio the other day, and it was about whether people of faith are faking their mental health well-being.
Oh dear.
You know, and this is somebody who's a person of non-faith. And we've done a program on mental health. Maybe one day, inshallah, we'll call you back, and we can learn more about your thesis on this, because there is a discussion, debate around. Some study was done in Leeds around the mental health issues, and it said that there was some evidence, empirical evidence, that people of faith who had a mental health issue, if they became, more familiar with their own faiths and the principles and values of their faith, it helps them with their mental health illness. And you've just sort of
I mean, one of the fascinating
that.
things I discovered was that during periods of fasting, people's mental health actually improved rather than got worse, because constantly they're living with that reminder that God holds them in their hand, that they are part of God's creation, that they have a purpose and a rhythm and a meaning to their lives. At other times of the year, when it's easier to forget that thing, that's when other things then take on a bigger priority for people, and they lose their sense of way. So when a faith and a belief provides a structure for people, then I don't think there's anything about faking a sense of well-being. I think that's something that does come. And what I find fascinating is that when people of faith actually start talking together across the different faith traditions, there's so much in common. Again, we're back to Joe Cox. There is so much more that we share than what separates us. And I think in that way, this sounds a bit grandiose, I suppose, but in that fact of sharing our faith in that way and understanding more about each other hangs the hope for future civilization in
inshallah,
a way.
yes, inshallah. We have to learn to be tolerant of everybody, and we may disagree, but we can do so with respect
and there's so much misinformation though, which is actually mischievous at best and wicked at worst. So that the ideas and the suggestions and the lies and the things that go on about what a faith is about actually gets in the way of people really understanding each other. So any kind of fundamentalist approach is actually closing the doors on people rather than opening the doors up to people to understand a bit more.
It's not allowing people to open up their minds.
Exactly.
And that's one of the biggest challenges we face at the moment.
Indeed.
People absorb things that they're being thrown at them without really questioning the validity of what is being presented to them. And that is something that is really dangerous in our current times at the moment, as far as I see it.
And I think when those things happen, then more mischievous factions like the far right and the far left seize on those opportunities and begin to stir the waters a bit more, and that's when unrest and mistrust starts to breed. And
that is something that we all need to be mindful of, and we need to constantly challenge that. It's been fascinating, the first part. We need to go for a break now. I hope our viewers have found the first part of this program really illuminating. I've found it really interesting, and discussing these issues with Reverend Andrew Howard. I don't know why I kept saying that to you before. Andrew Howard. Inshallah, don't go away. We'll be coming back soon. When we come back, let's talk about more of your work with different faith societies over there, and the work that you think Bradford is a better place. We'll come back soon, inshallah. Take care. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.